Imagine standing in a room where 150 million years of history is staring back at you, a creature that walked this earth long before humans existed. Its spikes, its plates, every bone whispering secrets from the Jurassic era. And now, for the first time in modern history, this almost mythical Stegosaurus has emerged from the shadows, commanding a price that shattered records and left the world in awe. Today, we're not talking about wealth, we're not talking about trophies. We're talking about a legacy frozen in time, a treasure of science, and a story so extraordinary that it can change the way we see the past, present, and future. What you're about to hear isn't just news, it's history being rewritten right before your eyes. When something extraordinary appears in front of the world, people often rush to reduce it to a number, a price, a headline, a moment of shock. But history has never been written by numbers alone. It has been written by decisions that recognize rarity when it stands in the room. What unfolded at that auction was not impulse, and it was not spectacle. It was the inevitable outcome of scarcity meeting significance. A nearly complete Stegosaurus skeleton, one of the finest ever discovered, entered the market, and markets at their core are about truth. And the truth was simple: nothing comparable exists. This specimen, known as Apex, is not just old. It is ancient in the most meaningful sense of the word. Roughly 150 million years ago, this creature walked the earth during the late Jurassic period. Today, fewer than a handful of Stegosaurus fossils approach this level of completeness, preservation, and scientific integrity. More than 80% intact, original bone, minimal reconstruction. That combination does not repeat. In any domain, finance, art, science, or history, when something is truly non-replicable, the market responds accordingly. The auction result was not about excess. It was about recognition. The final price, exceeding $44 million, did not shatter records by accident. It did so because the market understood what was at stake. This was not a decorative object. This was a once-in-a-generation asset, one that collapses the distance between modern civilization and deep time. When bidders compete at that level, they are not buying ownership, they are acknowledging responsibility. There is a misconception that value is created by demand alone. In reality, value is created where demand intersects with absolute scarcity. You can build companies, you can replicate technology, you can even recreate experiences, but you cannot recreate a Stegosaurus that lived 150 million years ago and survived extinction, erosion, and chance to stand before us today nearly whole. That reality anchored the price, not hype. What matters most is not that a record was broken, but why it was broken. Records fall when the market encounters something that forces a reset of expectations. Apex did exactly that. It reframed what a fossil could represent, not as a curiosity, but as a cornerstone of natural history with the power to educate, inspire, and endure far beyond a single lifetime. In every serious arena, the most important decisions are made when opportunity and obligation align. This was one of those moments. The auction did not simply close with a hammer strike. It closed with a statement that preserving the rarest pieces of our planet's story is worth real conviction. And history, when it is truly understood, always commands a premium. When you encounter something this rare, the question is never whether it is valuable. The question is how responsibly that value is handled. A specimen like Apex carries far more weight than its physical mass. It represents data, context, and insight that cannot be recreated once lost. Science advances not just through theory, but through access to primary evidence. And this fossil is exactly that, primary evidence from a world that existed 150 million years ago. What makes this Stegosaurus extraordinary is not simply its size, but its integrity. The skeletal structure preserves anatomical details that are often missing or fragmented in other discoveries. The plates, the spine, the limbs, these are not guesses reconstructed from partial remains. They are direct signals from deep time. For researchers, that level of preservation answers questions about posture, movement, defense mechanisms, and evolutionary design that textbooks alone cannot resolve. This is how understanding progresses, not through speculation, but through exposure to the real thing. Education works the same way. Curiosity is not sparked by abstractions, it is ignited by presence. When a student stands beneath a fossil of this magnitude, something shifts. Time becomes tangible. Evolution becomes personal. Science stops being theoretical and starts being human. That is why access matters. A fossil of this caliber belongs in an environment where it can be studied, interpreted, and experienced by millions. Not hidden, not fragmented, and not treated as a novelty. There is a tendency to separate private capital from public good, as if the two are inherently at odds. In reality, progress often occurs when resources are deployed with intention. Preserving and displaying a specimen like this requires funding, infrastructure, expertise, and long-term commitment. Museums, researchers, and institutions depend on partnerships that recognize the importance of stewardship over possession. The goal is not control, it is continuity. Scientific value does not expire. The questions asked today will evolve, and future technologies will extract insights we cannot yet imagine. What remains constant is the need to protect the original source. Once damaged or dispersed, the apport. Unity for discovery is permanently diminished. That is why preservation is not passive. It is an active, deliberate choice to safeguard knowledge for generations that have not yet arrived. This fossil is a bridge. It connects paleontology to education, research to inspiration, the past to the future. It stands as proof that investment can be measured not only in returns but in impact. When people encounter apex, they are not just looking at bones, they are confronting the scale of time, the fragility of existence, and the power of curiosity to endure across millions of years. That is the real significance here. Not ownership, not spectacle, but the decision to ensure that something irreplaceable remains alive in the public imagination. Because the greatest legacy is not what we accumulate, it is what we choose to protect, share, and pass forward intact. Access is the difference between possession and purpose. Owning something rare carries a certain responsibility, but making it available transforms that responsibility into impact. A specimen of this magnitude does not belong behind closed doors or reduced to a private talking point. Its true value is realized only when it becomes part of the public conversation. When researchers can study it, educators can interpret it, and millions of people can stand in its presence and engage with history directly. From the beginning, the intention was clear. This fossil was never meant to disappear from view. Objects of such significance demand openness. They demand context. They demand a setting where they can be examined rigorously and presented honestly. That is why ensuring public display matters so deeply. Museums are not storage facilities. They are engines of learning. They translate complexity into understanding and transform ancient evidence into living knowledge. When a fossil like this enters a major institution, it becomes part of an ecosystem. Scientists analyze it, curators preserve it, students learn from it, families encounter it. Each interaction compounds its value. What starts as a discovery in the ground becomes a catalyst in the mind. That multiplier effect is impossible if access is restricted. Knowledge does not grow in isolation. It grows when it is shared. There is also a long-term dimension that often goes unspoken. Public access ensures accountability. It guarantees that preservation standards are upheld, that research remains transparent, and that the object is protected from fragmentation or neglect. When a fossil is displayed and studied openly, it is subjected to the highest level of care, not because it is owned, but because it is entrusted. This approach reflects a broader philosophy. Capital can do more than accumulate, it can enable. When resources are used to support institutions that serve education and science, they reinforce the infrastructure that allows knowledge to endure. That is not charity, it is strategic stewardship. Societies progress when their most valuable assets, intellectual, cultural, and historical, are accessible rather than exclusive. The impact of public display extends beyond science. It shapes imagination. A child who sees this fossil today may pursue a career in biology, engineering, or research tomorrow. Inspiration is not predictable, but it is powerful, and it often begins with a moment of awe. That moment cannot happen if the object is hidden or privatized. This is what meaningful access achieves. It aligns rarity with responsibility. It ensures that extraordinary discoveries serve a purpose beyond admiration. In a world that moves quickly and forgets easily, placing something ancient in public view is a deliberate act of continuity. It says that some things matter enough to be shared, studied, and protected for the long term. That is the standard, not ownership for its own sake, but access that creates understanding. Because the ultimate measure of value is not how tightly something is held, it is how widely its impact is felt. Legacy is not something you talk about after the fact. It is something you build deliberately, decision by decision, long before anyone assigns meaning to it. When an opportunity like this appears, the question is not whether it is impressive, but whether it is handled with the seriousness it deserves. Extraordinary assets impose extraordinary responsibility. Ignoring that reality is how history is lost, fragmented, or reduced to trivia. This fossil represents survival against impossible odds. It endured extinction, geological upheaval, erosion, and time itself. That alone commands respect. But survival is only half the story. The other half is stewardship, what happens after discovery. Once something this rare surfaces, the responsibility shifts to those capable of protecting it. Preservation is not passive storage. It is an active commitment to integrity, expertise, and long-term thinking. Too often, people treat legacy as a personal monument. That mindset is flawed. Real legacy is institutional. It lives beyond a single owner, beyond a single generation. It is embedded in systems that ensure continuity. Museums, research institutions, educational frameworks. Placing a fossil of this caliber into that ecosystem is not symbolic, it is practical. It ensures the specimen remains intact, studied, and contextualized long after current conversations fade. There is also discipline and restraint. Just because something can be controlled privately does not mean it should be. True leadership recognizes when broader access creates greater value than exclusivity. Fragmenting a specimen, hiding it, or treating it as a trophy would have been easy. Choosing preservation over personalization is harder. But difficult choices are usually the right ones. Responsibility also means thinking in decades, not news cycles. Scientific understanding evolves, tools improve, questions change. What researchers can extract from this fossil 50 years from now may far exceed what is possible today. That future insight depends entirely on the condition and availability of the original specimen. Once compromised, that opportunity is gone permanently. There are no second chances with objects like this. This is where wealth intersects with obligation. Capital, when deployed without purpose, is forgettable. When aligned with preservation and education, it becomes durable. Supporting the protection of something that predates humanity is not indulgence, it is perspective. It reminds us that our role is temporary, and our responsibility is to pass forward what we were fortunate enough to encounter. The broader implication is simple. Progress is not only about building what is new, it is also about protecting what is irreplaceable. Civilizations are judged not just by what they create, but by what they choose to safeguard. This fossil now stands as a signal that some discoveries are too important to be diminished by short-term thinking. That is how responsibility becomes legacy. Not through ownership, but through decisions that ensure continuity. When future generations stand before this specimen, they will not care who purchased it. They will care that it survived, that it was preserved, and that someone recognized its importance at the moment it mattered most. Vision is revealed in what people choose to invest in when no one forces their hand. It is easy to follow trends, to allocate resources where returns are immediate and outcomes are predictable. It is far harder and far more meaningful to commit to something whose value unfolds over generations. That is where intention becomes visible. That is where investment transcends transaction. This moment was never about displaying wealth. It was about signaling priorities. Supporting something that predates humanity by 150 million years forces a recalibration of scale. It reminds us that our timelines are short, our influence is temporary, and our choices should reflect that awareness. When capital is used to preserve knowledge rather than consume it, it creates a different kind of return, one measured in understanding, inspiration, and continuity. Human progress has always depended on curiosity. From the first cave drawings to modern science, advancement begins when someone asks questions that extend beyond survival. Fossils like this are answers waiting to be interpreted. They anchor theory in evidence. They ground imagination in reality. And they allow society to tell a more complete story about where life came from and how it adapts, endures, and disappears. What matters is not the object itself, but what it enables. Research, education, wonder. These are not abstract ideals. They are outcomes that shape culture. A single encounter with something ancient and immense can change how a person thinks about science, time, and possibility. That kind of impact cannot be engineered. It has to be encountered. There is also an implicit message in choosing preservation over consumption. It says that not everything valuable needs to be optimized, monetized, or reduced to utility. Some things deserve protection simply because they matter. That principle applies far beyond fossils. It applies to institutions, ideas, and values. When leaders act with that mindset, they contribute to stability in a world that often prioritizes speed over substance. Wealth, when stripped of purpose, is fragile. It disappears from memory quickly. Purpose, when backed by resources, endures. This is how influence becomes constructive rather than extractive. By aligning capital with education and science, investment becomes a form of participation in human progress, not just accumulation. The broader lesson is simple but demanding. The future is shaped by what we choose to elevate today. Supporting discovery, preservation, and public understanding is not a passive act. It is a deliberate one. It reflects confidence in the idea that knowledge compounds, that curiosity scales, and that some returns are worth waiting for. That is the real signal here. Not extravagance, but conviction. Not ownership, but stewardship. In the long run, the most meaningful investments are not those that grow balance sheets, but those that expand perspective. Because when we invest in understanding, we are investing in the only asset that truly compounds across generations. So here's the truth. This isn't just a fossil. And this isn't just a record-breaking price. This is a bridge between 150 million years of history and every curious mind watching right now. Every spike, every plate, every bone of apex carries a story of survival, of wonder, of discovery, and it's now part of a legacy that will inspire generations. Remember this moment, because history isn't just written in books. It's standing in front of you, colossal, unyielding, and unforgettable. And one thing is certain, the world will never look at the past the same way again.